Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So as I'm sure most of you know, I love talking about assassins, especially after an assassin has been either buffed or nerfed. I asked you guys on Facebook and Twitter to vote for which champion you want me to talk about in my next video, and Kha'Zix ended up being the victor. So in this video, we'll be talking about this bug-like champion. I'll be talking about the good stuff, the bad stuff, and overall just how strong or how good is Kha'Zix at the moment. Now, I am not going to be talking just about mid lane Kha'Zix. In fact, I'll be talking about mid lane and jungle as well. So right before we jump into things, the question I want to ask you guys for this video is, which would you prefer, pizza or burgers? Let me know down below, and if you end up enjoying this video, make sure to hit that like button. But without further ado, let's jump right into the topic. So very quickly, as I'm sure most of you know, Kha'Zix got buffed very recently. Now granted, these buffs aren't anything completely out of this world. It's enough to really just notice Kha'Zix once again, remind yourself that this champion exists, try him out again, put him back in the jungle, maybe in the mid lane, and realize, you know what, this guy could actually be quite strong right now. But with that being said, let's talk about the positives and the negatives of Kha'Zix at the very moment. Alright, so starting things off with the positives and talking about mid lane Kha'Zix. So in lane, you can proc Thunderlords very easily because your auto attack with your passive ready to go plus a W or maybe a Q is considered 3 different types of damage, and Thunderlords will proc, giving you a lot of burst trade damage. Your W is also fairly useful in the laning phase. I mean, now it has a lower cooldown as well, but when it comes to maybe harassing, getting a CS from afar when you have a ranged opponent trying to maybe zone you out, or even give you some sustain, it comes in handy. If you get pushed under tower, well, you have your Q that's a fairly low cooldown to help you last hit a bit easier. His E ability is really useful as well. If you're getting a gank from your jungler, well, you use your E ability, jump in, go for the kill, help them out, or vice versa. If you are getting ganked, you have your E ability to jump away. Mid lane being a fairly short lane, it should cover most of the distance. It's also fairly easy to reset your passive and gain it back once again because you just have to go into the fog of war where the enemy cannot see you, and there's plenty of places you can do that in mid lane. Also, mid Kha'Zix isn't necessarily conventional, it is somewhat off meta, so a lot of people will simply not be expecting the burst damage that you can do. At level 3, if they're overextending a little too much, maybe sitting around 80% HP, you can jump in on them with your E ability, auto attack QW with ignite, and it's going to be doing a very surprising amount of damage. Also, compared to jungle Kha'Zix in the mid lane, you obviously will be getting a lot more experience and gold, so you can snowball hopefully a little bit easier. But now let's talk about the positives of jungle Kha'Zix. His jungle clear speed is honestly not too bad. I don't think it's anything absolutely mind-blowing, but it's definitely good enough. But now that this patch Tiamat got changed to auto cleave per auto attack, it's gonna make things a lot better, especially if you get it fairly early. Naturally, his E ability gives him solid gank potential. If you're level 6, then you have the invisibility to come out of the bush with, giving you a little bit of extra distance you can close. Here's one of the main things that I really like about jungle Kha'Zix and what I think really makes him actually quite strong. So his Q ability obviously gives him a lot of isolation damage, and at level 6, that's the first ability you evolve. So what does this mean? Well, it means that you can go and secure Dragon very early on into the game. You just jump over the wall behind Dragon and you start going ham, obviously assuming it's not warded. But another really cool trick you can do that I did a video about is that you can actually solo the Rift Herald as Kha'Zix around level 6. Now, I do recommend checking out that video if you haven't seen it yet because it does require a very specific way to do it, but the point is that it is possible. And Kha'Zix can even do Baron very early with his team again because of just the raw damage his Q provides on isolated targets. His W gives him the great sustain and clear in the jungle that he obviously needs. He has decent invading power and dueling power somewhat early on into the game. If the enemy team is doing Dragon or Baron, well, he can jump in and Q smite for a lot of damage, making it fairly easy to steal it. And for the most part, the buffs to Kha'Zix recently to his Q and W affect him more in the jungle than they do in mid lane. But next, let's briefly touch on the negatives of mid lane and jungle Kha'Zix. In the mid lane, he has a fair number of bad matchups, champions that can just simply out lane him, deal more damage than he can do, out poke him, and just make it very, very difficult. Up until he gets his Tiamat, his wave clear isn't anything to brag about, and it's gonna be hard to out push a lot of other mid lane champions. Like I said, the buffs on Kha'Zix are more focused on his jungle rather than mid lane in my honest opinion. So even though it's still technically does benefit mid lane Kha'Zix, it doesn't make it a completely different game. It only helps him ever so slightly. And he's still an assassin, so that obviously means he needs to snowball at least a little bit in order to be relevant or useful. And if you misplay a team fight, if you maybe aren't fed to a certain point that you should be in a team fight or go in at the wrong time, you are going to be very useless, much like a Katarina. And these 2 points also apply to jungle Kha'Zix. But speaking of jungle Kha'Zix, here are his negatives. His first clear in the jungle can be a little bit subpar, especially if you start the Krugs or if you don't get a very good leash. It's still very much doable, but you may fall quite low on HP. Most of the jungle camps have little small monsters beside them, so isolating the main big one is a little bit annoying. He is very squishy because clearly he's not a tanky champion and he uses a lot of mana in the very first few levels. So personally to me, starting Gromp and then blue buff seemed to be the best option. Next, let's quickly touch on what summoners and how you want to level and evolve your abilities based on both of the roles. Starting off with mid lane first, I personally enjoy starting with my W. Not only does it give me the sustain that I need just in case I'm against a ranged opponent that will simply out harass me, but if I'm gonna get zoned out level 1, this will help me get a bit of CS, get a bit of harass as well. And even if you're against a melee opponent, you can still walk into W for the damage and also heal yourself, giving you a lot of trade potential. Following that, if you're against a melee opponent, get your Q level 2, E level 3, and if you're against a ranged opponent, you want to get your E level 2 and then Q level 3. After that, you want to max your Q first, followed by your W, followed by your E, and ultimate whenever you can. And when it comes to evolving your abilities, you always want to evolve your Q first, and then your E, and then either your W if your team needs a little bit of harass or poke or siege, or if your team already has someone that can provide some nice siege damage, then you want to get your ultimate instead. However, for the jungle, you instead want to start with your Q ability and then you want to get a point in your W at level 2 and then your E at level 3. Now if you're having a little bit of issues in the jungle, then put another point in your W at level 4, but usually you shouldn't need to. So then you just want to max your Q first, followed by the W, followed by the E and ultimate whenever you can, and you want to evolve the exact same abilities in the exact same order as I said for mid lane Kha'Zix. Now right before we get into the items and the builds and all that stuff, let's talk about some general tips and tricks that I recommend you keep in mind whenever you're playing mid lane Kha'Zix, jungle Kha'Zix, or either of the two. So first, no matter what kind of Kha'Zix you're playing, when assassinating a target, usually, if you can, you want to start with your ultimate first, with your Yomu's proc, get in range, auto tag, QW, all that good stuff, and when they burn a flash, when they burn an escape ability, then you want to use your E. When it comes to actually killing a target, maybe in a team fight or something, you want to use one of two combos. If you can land your W on them confidently, then you want to start with that first, throw the W out, E on top of them, use your Tiamat Q in the air, then you land, do the E damage as well, and then auto attack for hopefully the finish, and then maybe another Q. Or instead, you can start with your E ability, Tiamat Q in the air, land, do the E damage, auto attack, W, and then Q as well. Now for mid lane Kha'Zix, here are some really important things to remember. First and foremost, like I said, W plus auto with passive is a lot of trade damage because you proc your Thunderlords very easily. You can also use your passive to check if a bush is warded, so if your passive is used up and you don't have that bonus attack damage, go into a bush. If your passive doesn't come back up, then that bush is warded because obviously they still have vision of you, and the only way to get your passive back up is to lose vision from the enemy team. So something really important to keep in mind. If you're feeling somewhat confident in the lane, try to zone out your opponent by making them run away from their minions and feel scared. The second they do, you can probably jump on them and do a lot of isolation damage. For most of the laning phase, you have to learn to play somewhat passively and just use your W to harass and farm, because again, most matchups aren't going to be really in your favor. And only use your E ability when you're going in for harass if you 100% know that the enemy jungler is not ready to gank your lane. But moving along to jungle Kha'Zix, you can kill the Scuttle Crab after your first rotation in the jungle. A lot of the times you might be fairly low on HP, so with the Hunter's Talisman you can actually get a lot of life back surprisingly just from auto attacking and hitting the Scuttle Crab. On top of this, when you are clearing the jungle, especially on your first clear, you want to kill the small monsters first so that you can isolate the big one and kill a little bit faster. If possible, do not use your E ability to initiate a gank, simply walk up behind them and then again use your E ability to follow up their escape. Next, let's finally talk about the build, the runes, masteries, items, and all of that good stuff. So talking about the rune page first, because you can use this on either jungle Kha'Zix or even mid lane Kha'Zix. It's fairly standard. You want to run flat AD reds and flat AD quints. You then want to run armor yellows if you're in the jungle or against an AD opponent mid, or you can run HP per level if you're against an AP opponent mid. Throw in some flat CDR blues, just enough to get 5%, and then the rest can be magic resistance. The mastery page is going to be 12-18-0, and this is for mid lane Kha'Zix or even jungle Kha'Zix. This is the one I do recommend for mid lane especially though, because Thunderlords again is very strong on him. You can proc it very easily and it just works. Now you can definitely use this in the jungle, but it's a little bit risky because your first clear is going to be very difficult. So instead, here's another mastery page you can use for jungle Kha'Zix that I see a lot of high elo Kha'Zix run instead. 12-18-0, because the extra defensive stats and the strength of the ages will help you a lot in the jungle. Next, let's talk about what items to get when playing mid lane Kha'Zix. You almost always want to start with the corrupting potion. It just works. It gives you the sustain you need for mana and HP in the laning phase, makes your harass and poke a little bit stronger, and it's just nice. Your core items without question are going to be Yomu's, your boots of choice, usually Lucidity, and then the Ravenous Hydra. I feel like this should be somewhat self-explanatory, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. However, taking a look at the other items to choose from, I only recommend getting Duskblade of Drakthar if you're fed and you want to snowball even further, because the armor penetration is very useful. Other than that, actually applying the Duskblade passive Nightfall to your target is a little bit awkward with how Kha'Zix's kit works, and I have to say it isn't as strong as I thought it would be. Death's Dance is a pretty good option because the CDR is nice, you get a lot of damage, and you get a lot of life back because of the damage you deal with your isolation Q. Mav Malmorius obviously against a lot of AP, Sterak's Gauge because Sterak's Gauge is flat out broken. Now you're gonna notice I don't have Black Cleaver in here, and even though I do think it's a decent item, I don't have it here because I feel like just raw penetration is simply better. AKA items that give you the penetration stat instantly, not Black Cleaver, because by the time you stack it up and you do your full rotation, your target should already be dead. But either way, that's kind of how the build can look like for mid lane Kha'Zix. Now for jungle Kha'Zix, you want to start with the Hunter's Talisman and the refillable potion. Usually you don't want to upgrade the refillable potion because it's just not really worth it. You saw me have it in some of the clips in this video, but that's because I was just testing it. Personally, I like the blue Chilling Smite, but I've seen other Kha'Zixes get maybe the red one instead. The blue one has more burst damage and Kha'Zix is all about the burst damage. But either way, whichever one you choose, you without question want the Warrior Enchantment. And then your other core items are the boots of choice, again usually Lucidity and the Ravenous Hydra. And the other items to choose from is pretty much the same as mid lane Kha'Zix. And now to end off this somewhat long video, my final thoughts. So of the two potential roles, I have to say jungle Kha'Zix does feel better. Not only because it feels like he should be played there, but the buffs benefit him there much more. That's not to say that mid lane Kha'Zix is just flat out bad. I mean, they both can be just as strong as the other one. But from what I understand and from what I've seen, jungle Kha'Zix just seems to be more fitting and safer, especially since he can get control of those objectives, like I said, much easier as a jungle Kha'Zix rather than mid lane. Now having said that, it does seem like mid lane Kha'Zix has more potential for a snowball because again, you are getting more experience, you are getting more gold. But it is also much more risky. But either way guys, that is about it for this video. I hope you really did enjoy this, maybe learned something new or got a better idea of what the state of current Kha'Zix is in mid lane and in the jungle. I usually don't talk about both roles in such a way, so if you did enjoy this and really liked me talking or covering two roles, definitely hit that like button to let me know. Also make sure to share this with your friends, let other people know the state of current Kha'Zix. Check out my other videos, subscribe if you haven't. And here are my favorite comments of you guys when I asked the question, what assassin champion would you remove from League of Legends? But I thank each and every one of you for watching, and I'll see you for the next video. Peace.